BRRRR. Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. The letter B for buy, followed by 4 R's for rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. This is the investment strategy I've used for all my properties. Although some rehabs have been relatively light, only a few $1,000s required, compared to others being nearly and even over 6 figures, they all required some amount of rehab to make rental ready. I think the BRRRR method of rental real estate investing is by far the best method to make money and grow wealth with real estate. Let's talk about why. Husband, father, entrepreneur, realtor, a long list of other titles and descriptions, and landlord. Welcome to the And Landlord podcast with me, Jonathan Taylor Smith, also known as JT, following a roadmap to financial freedom through residential rental real estate. Welcome to the And Landlord podcast, and Lord podcast. Now, one thing I tell everyone is to learn about real estate. Repeat after me. Real estate provides the highest returns, the greatest values, and the least risk. Armstrong Williams. Welcome to episode number 14. BRRRR might be the best method of building your rental property empire. So let's talk about BRRRR. First, I think the general agreement is that the term BRRRR, again meaning buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, was coined by Brandon Turner of BiggerPockets.com. They've even released a book on it recently that I have, but I've yet to read. Before getting into real estate in 2015, I had talked about it for years, and it was always in the context of being a landlord. So I never caught the flipping bug by watching too much HGTV. It never really made sense to me why I'd want to do all the work to find a good house to rehab at a decent price and then take on all the risk of the project with the singular viable exit of selling, and then end up having to pay taxes on any profit, assuming there even is any. Then at the end of the project, you have nothing lasting to show for all the risk and effort, but possibly some cash that quickly disappears for things you won't even remember a few months later. After each project, you're starting all over from zero, so you have essentially created a never-ending job for yourself. No thanks. Instead, I got into real estate investing to own rental properties, and I immediately found that the best deals are on distressed properties. You see, if a house is in a pristine, move-in ready condition, then absolutely anyone can buy that home. It's therefore almost certain to go for maximum retail price in just about every real estate market. Someone is going to buy that home to live in it themselves. As anyone seeking to buy that home as an investment rental property, and if they buy it at full retail price, they're almost certain to have negative cash flow. What you need is a distressed property. A house that has a problem you can solve. You want that house that needs new flooring, paint, has a bad smell, needs new appliances, new HVAC, roof, gutters. Or you can go big with foundation issues and fire damage, although I wouldn't recommend you start there. I estimated my first property needed $3,000 in rehab, and it actually cost me $9,000. But knowing what I know now, I could have gotten it done for $6,000. Once you find that distressed property and take it down for a price that fully takes into account the rehab that it requires, the buy in BRRRR, now the rehab begins, the first R. At this point, you haven't made any money. In fact, you're likely in for 20% down, closing costs, holding costs, and the cost of rehab. Although I often fund my rehabs in full or in part with zero-interest credit card promotions. I love free money. But once you have the rehab done and the property is ready to rent, you should actually have the home listed for rent and start showings during the rehab to have a tenant ready to go as soon as the rehab is completed. But once it is completed, now it's time to start getting paid. You collect the security deposit and first month's rent, and now that the property has a tenant present, you can begin the refi process in some cases. You see, there's an ugly thing related to the refi called seasoning. Depending on the refi lender's policies and how you funded the purchase, you may be in the unfortunate situation of needing to have owned the property for some number of months, like 12, before being able to refi at 75% of appraised value. And you very much want to be able to refi at 75% of appraised value. You don't want money being locked in the property that you can't get at because of this technicality. Otherwise, you may be limited to only being able to refi up to the purchase price plus rehab cost of the project, having no association to what the property is now actually worth. You see, the best execution of a BRRRR deal is where you buy a distressed property for like $70,000 and put in something like another $25,000 into the rehab with maybe $5,000 in closing and holding costs throughout the project. So you're $100,000 all in. But then it appraises for $160,000 and you're able to refi at 75% of that, $120,000, thereby putting $20,000 of profit in your pocket tax free. But unlike the flippers, you still own the property with $40,000 of equity present. And hopefully you have it rented for something like $1,300 a month. And so you're pulling in a couple of few $100 per month in positive cash flow after paying the mortgage, any HOA if there is one, and holding reserves for vacancy, repairs and maintenance, CapEx, and property management. And at some point, your reserves may become high enough to cut them back a bit, increasing your cash flow further, especially if you did a great tenant-proof rehab and selected your tenant well. So now you're making an additional few thousand per year from rent, maybe even more if you manage the property yourself or have it rented for a higher amount, or if you've got great low-interest financing. And you've got $40,000 in equity present, meaning your net worth has increased by that amount. Best of all, you've got all your money back out of the property, plus $20,000 in profit tax-free. This means your return on investment, ROI, is effectively infinite, as you've got no money left in the deal. Everything you make is free money created out of thin air, and your $20K is tax-free. Whereas there are scenarios where the flippers may end up paying as much as 50% or more of their profit in taxes. Again, no thanks. Now, as stated, this is sort of a best case scenario, so you can be forgiven for thinking that this won't be your outcome. But I've had BRRRR deals that went even better than this. And the opposite is also true for me, where I've had BRRRR deals that it turned out I had bought too high, the rehab went over budget, and it rented for $100 a month less than expected. And then to add insult to injury, or in this case, it may be better stated, injury to insult, it appraised for far less than expected. So I ended up having to put in more money, another $9,000 at the refi closing, instead of getting a nice profit check. But the so-called bad BRRRR deals like that are why I love the BRRRR method so much. Because even on that deal, I was eventually able to raise the rent, and it never was a cash flow negative situation even before that. The value is now where I expected it to be the prior year. The ROI I'm getting on the money still invested in the property, even after having put in more money, is decent. And if I wanted to sell or refi the property now, I'd get the profit I had been expecting the prior year. And if I did sell, because I've now owned the property for over a year, my taxes would be greatly reduced. But this is one of my best single family homes in an area with new construction all around. So the longer I hold it, the better deal it becomes. Now it generates great cash flow, and it seems targeted to go up in value like 5% per year, at least for the next few, due to the location and activity all around. But I got great tax benefits from the rehab expense and depreciation. The mortgage is being paid down by my tenant, as despite having to put in more cash, I got a great rate on the refi. And I could refi this property again at any time and get more than the $20,000 I had originally expected to net the year before. As I'm also now much better at getting the appraisal I had expected, a lesson learned on comps. So I love BRRRR, as the good deals are so good. But even the bad deals seem to turn out good with a little time. But now the asterisk on this, quote, bad deal example is that I selected my location very well. I bought too high. I should have gotten the property for less. I underestimated the rehab cost, which is also why I should have gotten the property for less. Overestimated rents, even though I got there eventually. And I considered the comps wrong, thereby missing my appraisal target. That's 4 mistakes. Had I made a 5th mistake by doing all of this on a property in the wrong location, I guess it would have truly turned out to be a bad deal then. The location and the market saved me. But then it was the location and the market that made me willing to pay what I paid in the first place and made me think that it would immediately rent for more, as well as what made me think I'd get a higher appraisal. I saw all the new construction around and saw what those homes were being listed for, smaller than mine and with fewer bedrooms, so naturally mine would be worth more. What I failed to consider is that those homes had not yet sold for those listed prices, and that concessions were being offered by the developer on those homes that had sold to get the houses to start moving. So I jumped the gun on my assessment. But less than a year later, with the comps now present and the market still on an upswing, I was where I expected to be the prior year. It turned out to be a good BRRRR deal despite my errors. This means that as long as you don't make certain mistakes on things that cannot be fixed, like location, it's hard to lose long-term with the BRRRR method. And that's what it's all about for me, long-term. I'm not a flipper because I'm trying to grow a real estate portfolio of a large number of cash flow positive rental properties. And I've found the BRRRR method to be the best way of accomplishing that goal. Buy a distressed property that no one else wants, other than maybe another investor, but that is in the right location. Rehab that property to be tenant-proof, worth full value of other homes in the area. Rent it out to a great long-term tenant who will treat the home with care, admittedly sometimes a challenge, and then refinance that property, pulling out as much of your invested cash as you can, hopefully all of it, plus a nice profit, and then repeat this process until you have 10, then 100, and then shoot for 1,000 cash flow positive rental properties that will eventually be paid in full by your tenants. You are only limited by the systems you put in place to automate things and the drive you have to create a rental property empire that will provide for your needs for the rest of your life and give you a legacy to pass down to those you love. I'm all about BRRRR. And once your skills improve, you can take on the really challenging projects, also the most profitable, like those with foundation issues, fire damage, or the dreaded black mold. In a coming episode, I'll discuss the many problems I've encountered and those you might encounter in real estate investing and talk about how to overcome them. As a real estate investor, you're basically just a problem solver. And so your profit will be directly proportional to the level of problems you're able to solve. One of my best BRRRR deals had both foundation and fire damage. It was a duplex I purchased for $85,000 and then put another $90,000 into the rehab. So I was all in for $183,000, including about $8,000 in closing and holding costs. The project was funded by a hard money lender, so they provided 80% of the $85,000 purchase price and 100% of the $90,000 rehab expense. This means that I was out of pocket for about $25,000 personally. And after getting the rehab completed and tenants in place, at the time of refi, this duplex appraised for $305,000. So I took out a loan for just 70% of this at $213,000. That means I got all my money, $25,000, back out of the property, plus an additional $30,000 in tax-free profit. And I still own this duplex that now generates $2,500 a month in rent to pay my $1,700 a month mortgage, which includes the escrow for taxes and insurance. So prior to accounting for reserves, I'm getting $800 a month in positive cash flow which is an additional $9,600 per year on top of the $30,000 I already made. And with $90,000 going into the rehab, not much is needed in the way of repairs and maintenance or CapEx, and it is unlikely to be vacant. Plus, I manage it myself, so reserves needed are pretty low, but I account for them anyway. This duplex is located in downtown Durham, which is basically gentrification central, with recent new construction and rehabs all around. So today, it would almost certainly appraise for $375,000, if not more. Between appreciation and the mortgage paydown that has taken place since the prior refi, this means that I likely have well over $165,000 of equity in this duplex. I could sell it and 1031 into something else, or depending on what rents would support and the resulting debt coverage ratio, I could refinance it again, pulling out even more cash. It is even likely that I'd get a better rate today than before. So these are the types of BRRRR deals that I seek, and this specific property sat for weeks before I noticed it, because others were apparently scared off by the fire damage and 2-inch cracks in the slab foundation. But my experience level and increased problem-solving ability from prior projects allowed me to take on this challenge and solve that problem, resulting in great profit for myself. Again, in real estate investing, your profit will be proportional to the level of problems you're able to solve. Every rental property I own had some problem that needed to be solved. Some were as minor as cleaning and carpet, or maybe painting, all handled for a few $1,000s. Others required 6-figure rehabs. For example, in a coming episode, I'll tell you about an unfinished duplex I bought that required around $150,000 in rehab. Again, it was one of my most profitable deals that's actually still paying off. More on that in a coming episode. But now there is certainly a place for turnkey investing, whereas the name would imply it requires nothing to be rental ready other than turning the key. But that also means that someone else has likely taken the profit off the table that would have been possible as a BRRRR deal, which makes perfect sense because they solved the problem for that property, not you. So I'll end it here, but I'll certainly talk more about the BRRRR method of real estate investing. Go to andlandlord.com/books to find a link to where you can buy the BRRRR book from BiggerPockets. I'll also talk more about problem solving in real estate, while also mentioning some of my better and worse deals. But if there's a house you've seen for months or even years in your area that is obviously vacant and distressed, find out who owns it. Get in touch with them and see if they'd like to sell it. If you can get a distressed property under contract to purchase at a price that fully takes into account its current condition and its location is in the right area, you've got the makings of an amazing BRRRR deal at your fingertips. And it sounds cliche, but getting the money is the easy part once you've got a great opportunity under contract. When that happens and you need some direction, BiggerPockets.com is a great place to seek advice, and you can even call me. I'm always happy to be of aid to someone trying to succeed in real estate investing. Thank you for listening to the And Landlord podcast with me, Jonathan Taylor Smith, by Blue Chariot Media, following a roadmap to financial freedom through residential rental real estate. You can find the podcast website and blog at andlandlord.com. The main company site is bluechariot.com. If you've received any value from this podcast, help me, please, to make it available to others, and make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing and posting your 5-star rating. Plus, share it on social media. I welcome your comments on the blog. And if you'd like to share your landlord horror story or have a comment or suggestion for the show, call 844-USA-BLUE and enter extension 263, which spells "and" on your keypad, as in "and landlord," and leave a message. It may be used on a coming show. Thank you. Be all that you are. and Landlord. Nothing on the preceding show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for personal advice. The comments and opinions of any guest are their own. Information is not guaranteed. Any investment may have potential for both profit and loss. The host is speaking solely on behalf of Blue Chariot Media, LLC.